Before working with the Cortool, add oil to all its moving parts. This allows you to work more comfortably and prolongs the life of the Cortool. To prepare a single clamp, use a piece of string for quick measurement of the material. Hold the string along the handle of the tool to get the standard length of approximately 160 millimeters. Hold it against the pipe and measure twice around it to take into account the size of the pipe. The string allows you to comfortably measure from the coiled wire. Bend the wire neatly on the mark and cut off a manageable length. The clamp is then formed around the pipe by bending the ends of the wire through the loop, around the pipe, and through the loop again. Now the clamp is ready for use. Hold the Cortool so that the head faces upward, exposing the cogwheel inside. When held correctly, the shaft with rotary discs on either side appears horizontal. Turn the disc's specially cut notch so that it appears level with the handle. The single clamp is lowered onto the tool by inserting the wire ends through the holes on the side of the upward-facing head. Place the clamp so that the bridge faces upward towards you. The clamp is held in place by bending it outward through the specially cut notch and bent over and around it for grip. Slide it onto the pipe and over the area to be clamped. To neaten the clamp's hold around the pipe, one can press the wire together. When the pipe bulges slightly where the clamp hugs around it, the Cortool is swung over and cut loose with a side cutter. Flatten the wire ends sticking up from the clamp and smile at yourself for having completed a single clamp. Hold the Cortool upright and carefully turn off the leftover wire. Now we can tackle the double clamp. As with the single clamp, begin with the standard length of approximately 160 millimeters and measure twice around the circumference of the pipe. Bend the wire once on the mark. The Cortool allows you to create a comfortable width for the crosswise bridge that is to hold the joint in place. Bend the wire again to indicate the size of the crosswise bridge. The clamp is formed around the pipe by bending the wire ends through the loop, around the pipe, and through the loop again. The crosswise bridge is wound around the pipe until it lies flush against it. Place the clamp so that the crosswise bridge faces upward towards you. Now insert the wire ends through the holes to hold the clamp in place. Hold the Cortool so that the head faces upward, exposing the cogwheel inside. Turn the disc's specially cut notch so that it appears level with the handle, facing towards you. Note the ease with which one fastens the clamp, even though the pressure is rapidly building around it. To neaten the clamp's hold around the pipe, one can press the wire together, causing it to lock neatly. When the pipe bulges slightly where the clamp hugs around it, the Cortool is swung over and cut loose with a side cutter. Hold the Cortool upright and carefully turn off the leftover wire. Begin with a 160mm piece of wire to form the leg of the V-clamp. Bend it twice around the pipe and extend a straight piece which forms the second leg, and cut it off from the coil. Load the clamp onto the Cortool by crossing the two legs over the angular nose on top of the Cortool. As with the single and double clamps, the wire ends are bent outward through the specially cut notch and locked by winding it around it. Hold the Cortool tightly as it tends to turn against the winding. To neaten the clamp's hold around the pipe, one can press the wire together. When the pipe bulges slightly where the clamp hugs around it, the Cortool is swung over 180 degrees to lock the clamp. To finish off, the wire ends are untied from their position at the notches. To allow one to wind it safely, without snapping the wire. Bend the wire ends away from the knot and cut them off neatly. The Cortool system provides a variety of techniques to suit all your clamping needs. These include single, double, and V-clamps. The double clamp makes use of a crosswise bridge lying across the area to be joined. Large clamping applications require wider double clamp variations. Leakages in irrigation systems may occur in awkward places where space is limited, so it is a good idea to prepare a few double, single, and V-clamp variations for when trouble strikes. The Cortool also comes in handy when, for example, joining the ends of a fence wire that has snapped. The Cortool allows you to make two eyelets which are joined in the middle. Insert the wire end through the first eyelet and proceed towards the second eyelet on your right. Begin with a length of approximately 160 millimeters or more and fold it back. This end forms the first leg of the joint, which is bent to the front from underneath the joint and bent over to be tied later. Now return to the first eyelet and pull it up tightly to gain more tension where the joint is to be formed. Once the wire ends have been pulled closer, one can fold the second leg of the joint and cut it off the coil. The second leg is bent over from the top, while the first was folded from underneath the joint. The wire ends should be pointing towards you, and the legs should be crossing to form a characteristic V shape. Hold the tool so that the head faces upward, exposing the cogwheel inside. Turn the disc's specially cut notch so that it appears level with the handle, facing towards you. Load the wire ends onto the Cortool by crossing the two legs over the angular nose of the tool, and fasten them at the notches. Remove the leftover wire to work more comfortably. Fasten the joint while pulling it towards you, shifting your weight to create the necessary tension. Hold the Cortool at the head while cranking it. Be sure to check the tension. As the tension increases, one might need to readjust the Cortool's relative position as it turns against the winding direction. To lock the joint, turn the Cortool over 180 degrees. When untying the wire ends, bend them away to work more comfortably. When the joint is secured, one can clean it up for a finer finish. To pull up a fence, begin by bending a generous length of coiled up wire. This forms the binding piece, which is fastened onto the straining pole to pull up and hold the fence in place. The binding wire is joined to the other end by a strong knot in the middle. To create such a knot, a shorter length from a different coil of wire is used to create what looks like a little hook. When brought together, the little hook is inserted through the bent legs of the binding piece. The binding piece is lifted over the short leg of the hook so that it rests on it for support. The short leg is then bent inward and lifted over the binding wire and pressed through the binding wire loop. Insert one leg of the binding piece through the pole and load it onto the Cortool. Turn the rotary disc so that the specially cut notch appears level with the handle of the tool. The wire is inserted through one of the holes on either side of the Cortool and fastened around the notch. With the hooked end and coil in hand, the farmer then walks over to the other end of the fence where another pole awaits. The wire is wound twice around the pole, cut off from the coil, and fastened tightly. As the Cortool is cranked, the knot tightens and the fence is erected. Undoubtedly, this is the strongest known wire knot. When one is satisfied with the tension, one can fasten the other end of the binding piece. The so-called binding leg is then wound twice around the pole and cut off from the coil. One can bend the wire around itself to secure it and clean it up by cutting off the leftover wire. Remove the core tool and cut off the leftover wire. If preferred, one can perform a similar bind and knot operation with a chain. Use a binding piece of a comfortable length which is bent while still on the coil. A shorter length from a different coil is bent to form a hook-like shape. When bent, the short leg of the hook should point towards you. The hook is then pushed through the loop of the binding wire and its short leg is bent inward to form a knot. The binding wire is inserted through the first link of the chain. The chain is taken around the pole and brought around until the links touch. Stick the wire through another link. Hold the Cortool correctly, with the head facing upwards, and turn the disc's specially cut notch to appear level with the handle. The binding wire is then inserted into any one hole on either side of the Cortool head, and is locked at the notch. The loose chain allows you to move the binding side up and down according to your binding and fencing needs. On the other end, the wire is simply wound twice around the pole and fastened casually. The Cortool is cranked to tighten the knot which holds the tension and to fix the bind onto the pole. Be sure to check the tension. The binding wire is wound twice around the pole and fastened onto both legs of the binding piece. Now cut off the binding piece attached to the chain and remove the chain for the next bind. The Cortool also provides a great solution for fastening one pole at right angles to another. Begin with a piece of string for quick measurement of the material. Measure once diagonally around both poles. Include an extra length of approximately 160 millimeters for fastening it. The wire is bent according to the measured length on the string, and when bent over, it is cut off. Hold the bent area towards you so that the wire ends are bent around the back. The legs cross each other behind the poles and are brought over to slide through the loop. Hold the Cortool correctly. The wire ends are inserted into the holes on the side of the Cortool head and fastened at the notch. When the tension is to your liking, the Cortool is swung over and cut loose with a side cutter. Remove the Cortool to flatten the leftover wire. To secure the hold, one can bend a U-shape, which is to hold down the folded wire.